Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 324, Robert Heron and I recap our experience calibrating Leo Laporte's OLED TV. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded October 6, 2016. Episode 324, Leo's LG OLED Follow-Up. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Optical Cables by Corning. Corning's incredibly durable Thunderbolt and USB 3-point optical cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to opticalcablesbycorning.com to learn more. And by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of SuperTank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit epson.com/ecotank to find out more. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Robert Heron, who comes to us again after we sat around Leo's house calibrating his OLED TV. Hey, Robert, welcome back.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you on. Those of you who are watching live, unlike last week, we didn't stream it live, but we are now, and we encourage you to ask questions in the chat room. You can go to live.twit.tv, and there's a pop-out chat button there, and you can click on that and enter the chat room, or go to irc.twit.tv. And I'll be monitoring it, and I think Robert will be as well. So when you have some questions, put one or both of our screen names in your message, and that way it shows up in a different color, makes it easier to spot. So we spent quite a bit of time last week, you and I, Robert, calibrating Leo's
6 hours.
OLED. Yeah. Well, it was over 4, I'd say. And how we got that down to an hour and a half show is the miracle of Josh Windish and his editing skills.
Thank you, Josh.
Yes, thank you very much. We ended up with some interesting results that I want to sort of go over here. And if people were watching that show when we broadcast it last week, they might have noticed some stuff, and that's what we're going to go over here. First of all, I want to say, as I did last week, that the meters that we used were from Colorimetry Research, and I thank Guillermo Keller for that. They were the CR100 colorimeter and CR250 spectroradiometer, which was used to profile the colorimeter for the TV. And both are contact meters, which means that they can be placed in contact with a flat panel screen. And they have little rubber hoods that prevent ambient light from getting inside. And I thought I wanted to use those particularly because we were doing it during the day. Robert, you remember when we did Leo's Samsung OLED, right? We had to do it at night because we didn't have a contact meter. And we were up all night long.
Truly. If there is any reflection on the screen where the meter is reading specifically, that light will interfere with its result. And that's, as long as you can prevent that from happening, you can use a meter that can stand off at a distance. And in the case of projection setup too, you are using a non-contact meter anyway. So, and those rooms are generally pitch black. Right. So there is that challenge for any meter, is preventing ambient light from interfering with it, without a doubt.
That's right. That's right. And so we use these contact meters, and we put them in contact with the screen, and there was ambient light in the room. And in fact, some of the strange results we got, there were a number of people in the thread when I posted the results that said, you must have gotten some ambient light in that meter. So I'm going to explain how I don't think that's the case, because I did some additional testing since then. But first of all, I want to make sure that I also thank SpectraCal for their wonderful CalMan software, which is what we use to calibrate the TV. DVDO AV Lab TPG pattern generator, which you provided, Robert. Thank you very much for that. Along with the HD Fury integral processor, which converts the standard dynamic range output of the TPG pattern generator to high dynamic range, including the HDR10 metadata, which tells the TV, hey, go into HDR mode. And that worked very well.
It was a challenging calibration session, I felt, overall, for
a
couple of reasons that probably didn't come across in the video.
Yeah, tell us.
One, we were dealing with unfamiliar hardware and a new software build on a notebook. And generally speaking, you never really want to walk into a situation with gear you haven't used repeatedly and understand intimately. Right. And that's one thing, personally, I wouldn't have done. And also, we were trying to limit the goals in order to basically make an edit schedule as well. So I'm not making excuses for anything, but those are two of the things in the background of what you saw in that video that might not have been obvious. And in particular, I think the hardware and the software setup. I had brought my own gear, and we could have gone that route, but we had a setup ready to go, and we kind of went with it and took it. Yeah. Basically, rode that ride to wherever it went, and in the end, we did. I think we found some good, interesting figures, but there is definitely a spot where it makes me want to go back and take a look at that TV with my own gear and own setup and things I'm very familiar with. And everything was. Yeah, no, I would love it if you did that. I know it's not an easy trip for you either, but it's easier for you than me. Oh, I wouldn't mind that at all. And if that's doable, I would love to, actually. Yeah, no, I also just received a new meter that I'm itching to test anyway. So
okay, what'd you get?
I picked up a X-Rite I1 Pro 2, the new one that'll handle up to, I think, 13 or 1400 nits, in addition to being a spectrophotometer. So it's generally, I've used its predecessor for a long time, but it's limited to about, say, 400 nits. And this one will allow me then to use also my contactless colorimeter as well, to use it for profiling that. And between those, it's a pretty nice setup. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
Well, I was relatively familiar with the software, and this was a build that you're right, you didn't have. And there were some differences that we discovered along the way that were kind of strange. I think in hindsight, I would agree with you. It would probably have been a better idea to use your computer with your software because you were very familiar with it. And I was familiar with this build. I had been using it for a couple weeks before we did our thing, but you've been using your software that you have for quite a bit longer. So that might have been a more appropriate way to go. So, you know, you live and learn on these things.
Totally. And I also had one question about the CR100 in particular, is that we never did initialize that meter.
Yes, we did.
No, we didn't. Not in the video. So that was one thing I wanted to double check on. We had initialized the CR250, and then we profiled the other meter. But there was maybe we had, but at least
I think you misunderstood. It's very clear to me that we did initialize. The only meter that needs initialization is the 100.
Okay.
And,
if that's the case, I did. I'll double check that.
Yeah.
That might have been the 250 that didn't get it.
Well, and you don't need to.
I always assume that every meter needs to be initialized right when you first turn it on. So that's just something, again, it was unfamiliarity with the hardware on my part.
Well, these meters, which is why I spent some time with the meters before I came up there, was to make sure I knew what was going on with them. And so SoCal Ray Jr. says, yes, you did. No, you did not. SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room. That's Ray Coronado, who is a big help to me in all things calibration and Windows. I'm pretty sure best to go back to the video and look.
I think you're right. It might have been. It was the lower meter on that chart, and that was probably the 250. So if it didn't require an initialization, then there was no issue at all. So I'll leave it at that.
Right. I don't think there was an issue. I remember pretty clearly initializing the 100, the colorimeter, syncing it, which is another thing that you have to do to.
Oh, totally. To get the refresh rate of the display.
The refresh rate of the display, precisely. which it did. And then profiling taking the Spectro, the 250, and using the data that it collects to profile the 100, provide the 100, the colorimeter, with a profile for that particular TV. We did all that. I'm sure of it.
Okay. I will say since then, I have actually looked and calibrated an E-series OLED and some Pro OLEDs, and everything. I didn't see, at least in the E-series, I didn't see that similar red issue that we ran into before.
Right.
And a 2-point setup worked phenomenally on that set as well. The result I ended up with on the E-series earlier this week was about a 1.5, 1.6 on the grayscale for the D-Air. And then for color, it wasn't much higher. It was like about a 1.8 average. So the performance is definitely there, but I would, at least on that E-series for sure. And maybe perhaps the B-series does need more fine tuning within the CMS setup, the color management system.
I don't think so. I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. I just spent, after I got back from Petaluma, I have been spending some time over at the office and studio of David Abrams, who is a calibrator here in LA. And you know David.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good calibrator. And he has been very kind to allow me to come into his studio where he has a 55-inch LG B6. So the same model, just a different screen size. And I just spent the last couple days doing a calibration on that, including the CMS, because I wanted to see what the effect of the CMS, the color management system, was on the picture. And as I told you last week, I had heard a lot of people say, oh, that color management system causes more problems than it solves. It creates all kinds of artifacts. And so I went into this TV and actually calibrated it to see what would happen. And I'm going to show you what happened here in a little while. First of all, I want to remind everybody the results that we got with Leo's 65-inch B6 OLED. And that, we'll take a look at graphic number 1, and that'll show us some calibration there. This is pre and post calibration of the grayscale. And as you can see, pre-calibration was kind of off, but post-calibration with the 2-point grayscale calibration, we got all the errors under 2, I think.
Well under 2, yeah. That is a very good result, and that should be visually indistinguishable in motion video from a perfect result. So
exactly. So the grayscale with 2-point was no problem, and that's a good thing, because you and I started down the 20-point calibration road and realized, oh man, this is going to take hours, many hours.
It can, and there's also a subtle issue we've run into on different meters and different signal generators measuring that 20-point setup, where when you're doing the setup, it looks perfect. Everything measures spot on. But as soon as you remove this tiny menu from the corner and just do a straight measurement with nothing on the screen, it turns slightly red. And I believe it was still within, half a DE away from where it should be, but not always. And it was just odd that it was very consistent, that as soon as the menu went away, we remeasured it, red slightly elevates. And I've seen that a couple of times now. And that's something that makes it even more challenging than to use that 20-point setup. However, I've generally had very good results with the CMS setup on these TVs so far. So,
well, I'm gonna show you how I didn't.
Okay. I am curious, because I have the B series is the one I've worked on the least. It's mostly the G and mostly the E. A lot of people have the E series models, so
right.
Those are the ones I encounter the most.
Right. We should make sure everybody knows the B6 is the sort of entry level, if you will, OLED. There is a C6, which is the only curved model. We sort of don't even think about that one. The E6 is the next step up flat of the flat models, and then the G6 is their flagship, cream of the crop, top of the line OLED. And you say you've had most success, or most experience, I should say, with the E6, the sort of mid-tier model.
It seems to be the most popular of the two premium models, definitely. It's probably more of a price issue than anything. You can save about $1,000 or so. So with a very similar design, and otherwise fantastic TV. I mean, absolutely one of the best out there right now. So
yeah. Okay, so I want to show everybody the color that we got on Leo's TV, and this was more problematic. Let's take a look at graphic number 2, first of all. We didn't do anything with the color, so the pre and post are basically the same. And if you zoom into the CIE diagram at the top, you will see, either one of them, you will see that the red point, if you can see it, is kind of below the red corner of the triangle, which is where it's supposed to be. And you can also see if you scroll down a little bit, pan down, I should say, the red error is quite high. And so let's take a look at the next graphic, graphic number 3, which is, and zoom back out there, this is the saturation sweep. Okay, so zoom into the CIE diagram again there on the right, and you'll see what happened. It was very strange. The blue and cyan and green and yellow and magenta are all pretty good. They're
generally lined up along where they should be.
Yeah.
Blue looks a little undersaturated, and maybe the CMS could help correct that. And the tint on red is definitely off.
Definitely off.
But notice how it is in a straight line, and that was the part that had me wondering if maybe internally something wasn't being mapped right, because there's not a lot of variance in that straight line shot on red. But however, that point almost it's outside of Rec 7, outside of HD color space, and at least from 80% on, and then beyond that, it is really shifted off target. However, it just from experience, it looks pretty close to what DCI red looks like, or where it would be on that chart. So
yeah, you mentioned that.
That is an odd result, and I didn't see something similar to this in the E series. That's just one oddity.
Well, and to tell you the truth,
I had to do some slight tweaking, but it didn't take much to get the reds right in line.
Well, I didn't either on the B6 that I calibrated at Dave's rather. Let's take a look at graphic number 9. We're going to go a little bit out of order here. But if we take a look at graphic 9, we will see what's called the saturation sweep, which is what that was, with the TV that I just calibrated over at Dave's. And this is before the CMS, by the way. And if we zoom into the same place, look at where those red dots are.
Right on target.
They're right on target. They're right on target.
And notice we were also wondering too, because of where that red measured on Leo's OLED, it also restricts, because yellow is a combination of green and red. The yellows and the oranges and everything showed excessive error because that red is so far off target. When it mixes red and green to get those colors, there isn't enough saturation there to actually make that happen. So
right.
And then likewise, you look at blue, and 100% blue is right on target. 80, 60, 20 on down, or 80, on down is just, this looks where it should be comparatively. And now this makes me wonder if perhaps that's a defective panel, or there's some issue with it maybe. So it'd be best just to simply reset that TV and remeasure it and see what happens.
Well, and that's why I hope you get a chance to do that.
I'll schedule an appointment when it's convenient for everyone and get out there as soon as possible, because and besides that, it's a nice drive out there. It's in cow country.
Oh man, yeah, beautiful. You drive up to Leo's house and there's this pasture with goats grazing and stuff. It's really cool. It's really very cool. So let me just see here. We looked at the,
just to summarize that real quick. It's that when you looked at another B6 in another environment, similar equipment, you were not seeing the issues we were seeing on Leo's.
Correct. Same equipment. The exact same equipment.
Yep. And that's good to know, though, actually. And in the future, if I ever come across something that's significantly different from what I'm used to after looking at a few of the same model, it's a good red flag that there may be an issue with that particular panel. So.
Exactly.
Looking forward to resetting it and retesting it.
Oh man, I can't wait to hear about that. And maybe we'll get you back on and we can talk about the results of that when you do it.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to reiterate that I did an experiment with the lights on and the lights off. I basically did all my measurement runs with the lights on and the lights off, and the results were virtually identical. So it was not a matter of ambient light getting in to the meters somehow.
I've used similar meters to the ones we were using, and from colorimetry research, I've used like the Klein K10 and K10A, and that uses a similar form factor with that rubber hood. And I actually physically, I looked at how you had set it up, and it looked identical to how I would have done it, where you had an equal seal with the rubber around the panel or to the panel without excessive force, because that can also do weird things if, especially on LCDs.
Yes, exactly.
Creating a light artifact of some kind.
If you push hard on an LCD panel, you can see distortion happening around it. SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room is saying, I would like to measure another B series, but the same size as Leo's. And that's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't think that size would make much of a difference. Size doesn't matter. It shouldn't. But you never know. You never know.
But you are dealing with two different lines of panels being produced with different pixel pitches and things like that. So those panels aren't being carved off the same glass, so to speak. Not that those are
probably not
carved anyway. But that's just one other good point to keep in mind. I look forward. I want to say I have a client coming up with another B series, so hopefully I'll be able to see a few more here in short order. But
yeah, that would be very good.
Well, comparatively. Just a quick mention. I had looked at some Pro OLEDs earlier this week from Sony.
And the BVM X300?
Wasn't the 300, unfortunately. That beautiful 30-some incher. This was the 17-inch field usable Studio Pro monitors. And one thing to just quickly mention about those monitors is that the level of control is so granular. I mean, you had about 1,000 to 2,000 points of adjustment with a real knob that gave you just everything was just spot on, and those are a pleasure to work with. However, generally, if you're going to work with a Pro monitor or any monitor that can accept that lookup table, that's what you'll generate for a monitor like that if you're going to do it as best as possible. So
exactly. I had thought about possibly using what's called a LUT box, LUT, for lookup table, which would give us the ability to fix that red error no problem at all. But Leo doesn't have one, so
maybe not though. The LUT box can correct from within whatever the widest gamut is. So if we had turned that TV on to its wide color gamut and that red was still where it was, we still wouldn't have been able to generate the most saturated yellows and oranges and things like that. And the way the blue was measuring as well, it was truncated from 100%. And those two issues really. We weren't seeing the full color palette compared to other similar OLEDs that we've looked at. So again, this conversation kind of makes me go back and think that perhaps there's an issue with that panel. The day we worked on it, it did do a software update right in the middle of what we were doing too. So we kind of got that out of the way.
I didn't remember.
But
now you're reminding me. You're exactly right. It did.
When we first fed it HDR video, it actually it triggered some update internally to where not only did it switch all the ports back over to where you had the wide color mode enabled for input on HDMI, which was kind of cool actually. I've seen where you had to go in manually and do that, but the TV just did it. At least I don't believe that was set up prior to our being there. And then that update occurred. So I have also seen with updates they can erase all the settings. And because maybe things have changed enough internally to where they say, I don't know what you had before, but you should really redo it with this new setup we have. So there could be issues there, but generally they're not changing things like primary and secondary colors, but they might change some of the coding for how that stuff lays out.
Boy, you know what? This is so complicated, and you're right. That's a certain possibility. So, man, I can't wait for you to get up there again and redo it and check it out and see what you come up with.
I got to do it here in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, I'm out of country for a little while. So.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that happens then sooner than later. Hey, listen, before we continue, I'd like to thank one of our sponsors for this episode, which is Optical Cables by Corning. Now, Corning can greatly improve your audio-video workflow with their strong, durable, and far-reaching Thunderbolt and USB 3.0 fiber optic cables. Whether you're into high-end video, photography, audio production, or computing, Optical Cables by Corning will allow you to build a convenient workspace through a superior long-distance connection. Corning's USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt cables are incredibly strong and flexible, And they have exceptional cable runs of up to 60 meters or 200 feet for Thunderbolt and 50 meters or 165 feet for USB 3, making it so easy to move noisy, space-consuming devices away from your workspace. You can bend or walk on Corning's cables, and even if they're tangled, it's no problem. They keep transmitting at top speed. Now, Tonzauber Studio in Austria used Corning's USB 3-point optical cables to create an incredibly quiet recording space for live performances by placing their noisy devices outside of the control room. The cables were strong enough to be used outside the studio with no signal loss. So instead of investing in multiple extenders, adapters, and cables, turn to Optical Cables by Corning to establish the connection you need with one simple long-length cable. Optical Cables by Corning are available at all major electronics and professional AV retailers, including Apple stores, Amazon, B&H, and more. Optical Cables by Corning are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to opticalcablesbycorning.com to learn more. And we thank Corning very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. So I wanted to just show you a little bit more of the results that I got when doing Dave Abrams' B6. And here, well, first of all, no, that's okay. We'll go to graphic 12. We'll just take a look at some of the results that I got on Dave's B6. So I think we're below 3 in all cases. The low end is kind of high, which I noticed on Leo's as well. Well, the error was a little worse on the low end. But generally speaking, it got a lot better. And if we go to 13, we'll see the color. You can
kind of see there on that last chart, though.
Sorry. Go back to 12.
Oh, right there on the right-hand side, in the darkest gray grayscale tracking, RGB balance tracking. You see how green's a little bit lower right there, indicating well compared to the rest of the bunch, so to speak. And because green is what references the brightness of the signal in a sense, the luminance. Because it's down a little bit, you can see how it spiked that air up probably higher than it would be if you didn't factor in that brightness level as well. So that's where you could get some better tracking with a 20-point setup where you can then adjust more points in between. But overall, unless you're seeing significant artifacting in the darkest portion of the picture, that was pretty good. That wasn't, unless you're seeing something in content, that was much better than it was, at least. Although the overall error is still well above, or what was it? The average error was still at 3.5 roughly. So,
was it? Go back to number 12. Back to graphic 12 here, and
collection. Oh, that's just the max. Okay, so the max error on each one.
That's just the max.
Never mind. You're right.
I think the average error was under 2 anyway. If we go to 13, we'll see the color, and there we see. And this is without the CMS. And the color was, I generally got everything below the error that it needed to be, except for, looks like blue. Blue is somewhat undersaturated, and so it still has somewhat of an error.
Yeah, or again, it could be the luminance of blue as well. So it's hard to see with that particular chart there, unless you have the brightness of the primaries. Generally speaking, you want to get the brightness of the primaries very close, and then you want the hue or the actual color of the secondaries to be that. Those are like the 2 most important things for each one of those. For the primaries, it's more about the absolute brightness, the gamut luminance in a sense. And then for the secondaries, the luminance isn't as important as just making sure your yellow is right on target, your magenta and cyan are right on target as much as possible. That's a general rule for doing any kind of calibration. And again, we're only looking at the 100% values right there.
Exactly. Now, if we look at the next one, 14, I think it'll be the saturation sweep. And we looked at this one before. Was it 13 or 14? I can't remember.
That was an issue we had with our software, where at points we weren't able to pull up the saturation sweep.
But only in HDR. Only in HDR. In SDR, it was fine.
That's a pretty good looking result. I might,
and that's a really good result.
Play with blue a little bit and get those a little better on target, but red's phenomenal. Magenta's pretty damn close. Yellow is interesting how it hits 100% just fine, but 80's missed entirely.
Right. It's undersaturated at 80.
So it kind of makes a jump right there, which is interesting.
Yeah. And then we also looked at the luminance sweep, which is the next graphic, which is taking all the colors and showing them at different brightnesses rather than different saturation levels. And if we take a look at that.
This is a challenging test for any TV to do well on.
Yep.
It is very hard, especially with LCDs in particular, because you're altering the backlight level generally, or there's just more oddity to it. This is actually fairly consistent.
Yeah. And it wasn't that far off from, well, it was a little bit off from where Leo's was. Let's see. And then finally,
what's nice about this measurement is when it's presented in something like a color volume, where you can see a 3D space. Because this is taking measurements from black to white at steps in between, and then effectively you layer those on top of each other to create a volume view of how big is your color volume. And then say, like, in the case, does your TV maintain that wide color gamut all the way through from black to white? And that's tough to do for any display. Getting things right in the middle, that's generally the easy place. But,
yeah, exactly.
Keeping colors on target as it gets to 100% saturation, or the opposite, where it's getting down to 0% saturation. That's where you have consistency in the display or not. And it's very hard to calibrate that particular error out. But as far as white balance and color adjustments, no problem.
So the question that we've been sort of getting to here is, should we have calibrated the CMS, the color management system? And I went ahead and did that. I said no when we were there, and
I understood why too.
Yeah, and but then I said, okay, I'm going to try it on Dave's just to see, because his is really there for playing around with and seeing what happens. So that's great. And what I found was I didn't really have to do very much. I mean, I did get them better, the colors, at least measurement wise. And in fact, let's take a look.
I've had similar experiences where you shouldn't have to make, if you've got the white balance on target, you shouldn't have to make huge adjustments within the CMS on the new 2016 OLEDs from LG.
Right.
And that's a good sign.
It's a really good sign. It's a really good sign.
A little fine tuning, and because the majority of getting the color right within the color space is getting that white point on target. And once that's done, that fixes a lot as far as your color representation goes.
And the fact that the red was so far off in Leo's set, again, is suspicious.
Yeah, and blue. Now that I've looked at it again on that chart, it was undersaturated. So there's something odd going on there for sure.
There is. It's true. So I want to compare saturation sweeps in all three cases. First of all, Leo's TV that we measured. Second of all, the Dave's TV without color calibration, CMS, and third with CMS calibration. So that would be 3, 9, and 14. So let's take a look at number 3 first, and we'll see again Leo's saturation sweep problem. And here it is. The blues are undersaturated, but the red, that red's, sort of angling off into the hinterlands, is not a good thing. If we then go to number 9, that is the pre-CMS on Dave Abrams' set, and you can see the reds are right on the money, and I can't really see. Let me go back to Skype here, and the blues are in fact a little oversaturated, slightly.
Totally. And so is green, just slightly. And you can see how, because blue and green are sort of dragged off to the left a little bit, it brings cyan with it.
It does. Notice 100%
so cyan at 100% it has to go there. So it's like.
Right. But the other ones, the lesser saturation values are right on the money.
I find too, I'd rather have something, the larger the screen size, generally, I would rather have it be slightly oversaturated than undersaturated for most viewers. And just for, if you're going to go one way or the other, if it can't be right on target, generally slightly
a little oversaturated. And then finally, number 14 is the same test with the CMS after I adjusted the CMS. And there it is. And if let me look at it on a larger screen here. And notice that the blues, the cyan is back where it's supposed to be. The blues are even more oversaturated.
Green was shifted nicely, and that green
Yes.
was pulled back in on target, and that brought cyan with it. And
Yes.
blue is still a little off, and maybe 100% is stuck there, but I would try to work on like the 60 and the 80 and maybe the 40 to see if those could be using the available controls. And if you can get those on target and 100% is kind of close, that would be ideal. And when I say like good enough or you know, I'm truly referring to a measurable error level that is just below noticeable differences or measurable differences.
Right.
And within any even 2 meters, you'll have a variance as well. So if you pull 1 meter off and put another meter on, even within the same brand of meters, there will be variance as well. It shouldn't be a lot, but it all adds up to where it's very hard to chase an exact point. You get it to where the differences are unnoticeable, and compared to the perfect reference standard.
Right. And that's really where you want to be. I have fought long and hard against my own perfectionism to say, oh, I want to get that error just as absolutely as low as possible. And, you know, I'll spend hours on it. As you know, these things can sort of go on ad infinitum. One thing I noticed,
grayscale tracking, really, getting that flat is everything. And you can make a flat looking graph, but if it screws up, say from 0 to 20, and you ignore that, suddenly every time a person looks into a shadowed scene or something, there's a discoloration. And I've had people who actually train me leave TVs in that kind of condition. And I was like, and then the current owner calls me and sends me a photo going, what's going on right here in this scene? And I'm like, oh, well, can you send me the calibration report? And let me take a look at that. And it actually revealed what the hell was going on right within the report by looking at that grayscale tracking.
Right.
So it's just, if you're going to get one thing right, the color of gray is it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Now, we as you know, we didn't do the CMS here. I did it here. And then I started looking at some real content. And what I did was I set up one mode. I used the 2 ISF expert modes. One says bright room, one says dark room, but they can both be set up the same. And that's what I did in this case. I set up the dark room with the CMS adjustments that I made based on measurements, got the errors as low as possible, and then went to the bright mode and set it up exactly the same with the grayscale calibration, but then I didn't do the CMS. And what that allowed me to switch between them when watching real content. And what I found was pretty amazing, because with the CMS engaged, what I saw was some serious noise in certain parts of the picture. For example, in relatively brightly lit faces, or in the case of Art of Flight, you know, the Blu-ray Art of Flight?
Yes.
Which is all about snowboarding, extreme snowboarding. And the pans, the scenery of the mountains with the snow, and sometimes there are some rocks revealed where there's no snow. And the noise in those rocks was like, what? And the same thing in Stargate Continuum. I don't know if you've ever watched that one. That's got a great star field. It opens with a wonderful star field. So that lets you test black and starlight, star points, which is particularly revealing on LCD TVs, even backlit one, full array backlit ones.
Right.
And when they're in the pyramid, near the beginning, they're in the pyramid, they're witnessing the extraction of the last, I forget what he's called. Anyway, there's the pyramid, the walls are all rock, and they were just jittering and going crazy. And when I switched over to the non-CMS one, gone.
Interesting.
Not a problem at all.
This is Blu-ray content you were looking at?
Blu-ray content. Because the CMS we were tweaking was only going to be for Blu-ray standard dynamic range content.
Understood. Right.
So that's what I was looking at. And it was amazing. I didn't get significantly better results measurement-wise when I engaged the CMS, but it caused this weird noisy thing. And there was also some kind of weird banding going on as well that would simply disappeared without the CMS. So
that's something it's always recommended to do, is not only look at known content, stuff you've watched so many times on so many different displays that you're intimate with all the quirks of that video. And then also standardized test patterns using something like a 10-bit, not a grayscale sweep, but like a color sweep. So from dark to bright. And then so you can look for banding artifacts in all the different channels as well. There's some great test patterns out there for free. You can get a lot of this stuff for free if you look around.
You can't get a meter.
No, not a meter, but a decent meter, especially if you're doing something like LCD calibration or even basic projector calibration and OLED calibration to a degree. You can get affordable meters that'll do decent white balance, especially a 2-point white balance setup. So,
yeah, exactly. Compy 386 is asking, is the noise during CMS happening in 8-bit per channel material? Yes, the answer is yes. It was a Blu-ray. If so, is it due to the CMS adjusting? And I say yes, because I switched back and forth between CMS on and CMS off, essentially. And CMS on, it was bad. CMS off, it was invisible. It didn't happen.
I'll be sure to retest that on Leo's too if I have the opportunity. I'll set up the dark and the Lightroom ISF presets so that one has the CMS and one doesn't, and go from there.
I'd love to hear what the result of that is. Absolutely. And SoCal Ray Jr. says, absolutely right. Sometimes graphs don't tell you everything. Your eyes are the final test. And aren't they, though?
Without a doubt. That is a wise gentleman right there.
Indeed, indeed. Good old Ray knows his stuff. There's no question about it. Beatmaster, can't these be encoding issues? No, if they were, then I would have seen it in both cases. So the answer is no, they're not encoding.
It is nice to have a reference display or even a known quantity side by side. That's why lab testing I find is so effective. When you can have multiple displays all run off the same amplifier, driving content equally to each display after they're set up, and you can do side by side examinations. It helps narrow down issues and really pick out winners much easier.
It does. And that's another very important point. Dave Abrams has a reference monitor, an actual reference OLED in his studio. And I wasn't using it for this particular exercise in the last couple days, but I have seen it where the B6 is next to this reference monitor, which is calibrated to the 9s. And you can see some difference there. But it does bring up an interesting point, which is when you calibrate and you measure stuff and then you look at real content, if you don't have something to compare it with right next to it, you're not going to see as much problem, at least unless you have very experienced eyes, than if you have something right next to it. If there's nothing right there, it's much more difficult to identify problems. Don't you think?
I would agree with that. And I mean, just being careful too of how you approach it in terms of having a plan going in and not making adjustments you're unfamiliar with and sticking to the basics. There's also a set way of going about it in terms of the methodology, and we covered that, I thought, pretty well within the video. The initial setup and getting some of the basic controls out of the way and what they do in terms of picture influencing. Yeah, and going from there, and then beyond that, it's getting into that white balance setup. So.
Right, exactly right. Now, we did spend a little time with high dynamic range, HDR, and the calibration controls on the LG are, in my opinion, useless. The grayscale calibrations. It only gives you 20 point, and the points that it gives you are specified in code values. And those code values don't have anything to do with the code values in the CalMan, the software's HDR grayscale calibration. So I found it virtually impossible to do anything with that. Now, have you done calibrations on some of these other LG OLEDs that you've worked on?
Not with the code values. And actually, speaking with LG, they don't have a methodology internally, for at least that they're willing to release publicly, in terms of what you can do exactly with that setup. However, we've gone through all of the presets that were there, and it turns out that HDR standard for HDR10 content was really well done. It was probably the best part of the TV right out of the box.
Yeah, I totally agree.
The color checker points were very good, including the DCI 100% values. Red was right on target. Green and blue were also very well done. And clearly that TV had been optimized specifically for that type of content. So going through those different presets and then finding one that matched the new ETOF roll-off and everything the best. That was, fact, I think, that as important as anything we did was just figuring out which of the presets to even start with. And that for most anybody who owns an LG OLED, stick with that standard mode, at least
stick with that standard mode. Exactly. In fact, at first we were looking at the high mode, HDR high, I think it's called.
It had a bright and a vivid, I believe.
Yes, bright. That's what it was, HDR bright. And that's what it defaulted to. And that was like, whoa, Nelly.
It was brighter, but it wasn't tracking that EOTF as well as the standard mode did. So
in fact, I have the one report from that HDR mode that comes from CalMan. That's graphic number 6. And again, we didn't do any calibration here because really we couldn't. But you can see if you go up to the upper right, you can see that it tracks the EOTF like perfectly, just perfectly. And go ahead.
I was going to say too, also, you can kind of see from about a 70% value on up effectively where that bend in the EOTF is. It's like 2 different zones of the calibration. One for the values above whatever, getting into the brightest portion of the picture seems to be a completely different area from everything below it. And ideally, at least on the Samsung TVs I've encountered, the 2-point setup's almost perfect for that because it seems like the bright or the high adjustment takes care of that high end. And then honestly, getting back into the darkest grays in the chart you're showing right now, the tracking is pretty good, especially from 50% down. So if by simply adjusting, if they had a 2-point setup, I would try to either bring red and green up a little bit or bring blue down a little bit. Probably the easiest thing to do.
Exactly. Bring blue down a little bit.
And then just to see if it still tracks the OTF well, because that is showing you effectively the luminance output and how it's handling this new range of brightness. And you don't want to, even though that bend is still kind of an unknown in terms of how it should actually make that corner in terms of its response, the ramp up to it and afterwards should be pretty much right on target. And
exactly. And the reason that
it's more important, I think, to have that EOTF right than it is to get that grayscale perfect.
Right. Although you want the grayscale to be good.
Exactly. It's not like you don't want it to be, but it's more important to get that EOTF on target just so that when you're playing this new type of content, you're seeing a pretty good representation of the detail that's involved in terms of that new luminance availability and everything else related to that. So
right. And here in this case, what we're seeing, I think, is the TV, the OLEDs can only put out a certain amount of high brightness, and that is in the case of an OLED in the order of 500-600 nits. And then after that, the brightness may increase in the signal. In fact, it probably will because most HDR content is mastered at 1,000 nits peak brightness. And so the OLED has to roll off everything above 600, 500, 600 nits, whatever it is. And that's what we're seeing there.
Because it's kind of, what would be the word? It goes against what I was taught in the sense that when you get into these HDR modes, especially with HDR10, and I'm thinking specifically for Samsung LCDs, everything gets maxed. Contrast is at 100%, backlight level at 100%. My instinct is when I see contrast at 100% is, oh, you're clipping all the bright detail. However, the TV has to be in that mode to really represent based on its internal codes for specific scene types and how much luminance needs to be used in a particular picture. There's a lot of behind the scenes code that goes into how it represents that content and takes its available performance and maps that 1 or 2 or 4,000 nit range of the mastering studio that did this video into the performance of that television. And
right, exactly. A process called tone mapping, which we're all going to be learning more about in the coming days and weeks and months.
And the only people doing that tone mapping are the manufacturers. So they are making hard decisions in the background about a lot of different types of content. And they create literally a database within the TV of, say, a few hundred scene types and then how the TV should respond to those. And there's a little bit of voodoo still in terms of getting calibration right. But I have had success. calibrating the HDR settings on Samsung TVs with their HDR10 mode. I'm really looking forward to seeing on those TVs in particular the updates for HDR10 that'll add dynamic metadata, hopefully out before the end of the year, and that will make it more feature comparable to what Dolby Vision can currently do. So
Correct. Exactly right. Well, listen, before we wrap up, I'd like to thank our other sponsor for this episode, which is Epson. Now, Epson's revolutionary cartridge-free EcoTank line of printers for home and office introduce a new age in printing. The EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer doesn't use ink cartridges. Instead, it features an amazing, innovative, refillable ink tank, earning it the title of CES 2016 Innovation Awards honoree. So there's no more out-of-ink frustration. It includes up to 2 years of ink, equal to about 11,000 black pages or 8,500 color pages. And you save up to 80% on ink with low-cost replacement bottles. It's powered by Precision Core printing technology. It has auto two-sided printing and a 30-page auto document feeder, and easy wireless printing from tablets and smartphones. All EcoTank printers deliver an unbeatable combination of convenience and value. With Epson's EcoTank line of printers, you'll have the freedom to print without running out of ink. The Epson EcoTank system was named the 2016 Small Biz Windows Printer of the Year. So visit epson.com/ecotank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the Epson EcoTank printers. That's epson.com/ecotank. And we thank Epson for their support of Home Theater Geeks. Epson, exceed your vision. So we've been talking about calibrating Leo's TV, and we had some problems with the colors, which I'm really looking forward to you going back up there and trying it again and seeing if the CMS does anything. But I caution you to be very careful and do that thing that I did, which is implement the CMS in one mode and not in the other, and compare them. See whether if it can fix that red problem. I would be surprised if it can without a LUT box, and even then, maybe not. But it's likely to introduce this weird noise thing that I noticed. So I'll be really interested.
I'm looking forward to checking that out, and I'll make a point of pinging everyone to see when I get up there the soonest. So that's
very
pretty
good.
Cool.
Excellent.
Hey, and we kind of went back and forth as well on video noise reduction settings on Leo's setup and other TVs. And over the years, I have tested noise reduction and going back to when it was always the thing to turn off. Through some of the best video processors out there now. And yes, I would say in your highest quality content, be it ultra high def Blu-ray arguably, or a Blu-ray movie or things like that, you generally don't need noise reduction of any kind, be it analog type or MPEG. However, with all television content, if you're receiving it over cable or satellite or over the air, it is compressed to all high hell. And I notice it most in anything with a ticker. You will see mosquito noise artifacts around characters and things like that. And that's where things like MPEG noise reduction can really help. And a lot of these TVs do have an auto setting where I've noticed that it creates no degradation in signal quality with high quality content. But for like my favorite sports programming where there's just artifacts everywhere, it helps take some of the annoyance and the shimmering out of the picture, so to speak. So don't always poo-poo the noise reduction, especially on compressed sources, which is the majority of what we look at, or highly compressed sources.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And normally I do poo-poo it. You're exactly right about that as well. I'd rather just see what's there. But you're right. Also, video processing has come a long way since the early days of everybody saying, nah, turn all that stuff off. So if there's an auto setting, I don't recall whether there is in the LG. Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head. I want to say there is, because I'll generally just leave that on for the clients I have that are receiving satellite or cable programming, or if they watch a lot of streaming content. And arguably, with that setting, we've looked at 4K content in addition to your regular over-the-air stuff that's not in 4K. And I'm not, even with the test patterns, I'm not seeing degradation within the signal and things like that. But you should check it. I mean, you shouldn't just blindly just leave it on. And arguably, you should not be turning it on to high in all cases, unless it's a specific use case or something.
Yeah.
That's almost never the case.
I will tell you this. I actually went back to Leo's after we had been there while I was still in town, and I locked the ISF dark mode.
Okay.
I had asked Leo by email if he wanted me to do that, and he said sure. And you can unlock it with a passcode, and I'll shoot you that procedure by email, because when you go up there, you're going to want to unlock it, obviously.
I have the code. I'm good to go.
Oh, you do? You know? Okay, very good. I figured you probably.
Hey, is it still the case though? Even if you enter the code, you can't. Once it's enabled, you can't ever completely turn it off again. You have to.
No,
you just have to enter the code every time.
You have to enter the code every time. When you enter the code, it's unlocked. It's unlocked, and you can make changes. But then when you back out of that menu, it relocks.
No problem.
So it's not really a problem.
What? That's helpful.
I think so too. You can only do that with the ISF modes now. You can't do that with the other modes. But
you look at the number of settings we had to take a look at on any given TV, and if you're talking 20-point white balance setup, the value you have created by generating all that information in terms of what each specific setting is.
Yep.
Having a lockable preset is everything, because sure, you can document everything, and you should. However, using that remote and going through all 20 steps again, plus all the other variety of settings to get that all right when you could have locked it in the first place, or had a pro lock it for you, I say enable that feature. It's not harming anything. And if the person locked it, and if you really want that code, they'll give it to you. Just
exactly.
Not like it's state secrets or anything.
Yeah, right. So let's see if I got any questions here in the chat room here.
I'd say we've made LG a hell of a lot happier after this conversation. So,
well, and if you find out that if you come up with the same result in terms of the colors,
there's something wrong with that TV. I'm going to say then, or at least swap it out. So exactly. And I imagine before the 30-day exchange period is up, or hopefully.
Well, I don't know when Leo actually bought it. It might have been more than 30 days ago. But hopefully we can help him get LG involved. Maybe
that's a warranty issue too. I mean, if it's really doing what it's doing, there's something
true, and that's more than 30 days. That's certain. That's probably at least a year.
Totally. And if you bought it with a credit card, it's probably good for another year after that. So
exactly.
Read your policies, people.
This does bring up the importance of, if you're going to spend a lot of money, and these OLEDs are not cheap. I mean, the B6 is the least expensive of the 2016 LG OLEDs. And I believe, let me see what I looked this up over the weekend, actually, when I was subbing for Leo on the radio. Somebody was asking, well, how much is this B6 anyway? And I looked it up, and on Amazon, it is... let's see here. The 65-inch for $3,500. And for a 65-inch OLED, that's not bad. It's still not cheap. It's a lot of money for a lot of people. And if you spend that kind of money, it really behooves you to get it calibrated, to get a calibrator in there to take these measurements, and maybe they'll discover what we discovered, that there might be a problem. And even if not, even if it works great, you're making sure that the TV is performing to its absolute best potential.
Without a doubt. And I've had much more affordable TVs that out of the box were okay. But with tune-up, I was shocked at how close to reference you could get these. Just about any TV can be helped. But some are just like, diamonds in the rough, where a little adjustment and suddenly it's like, this value TV you picked up is the equivalent of some of the TVs I look at that cost 2, 3, 4 times this much in terms of just at least providing, faithful image reproduction and good color quality and detail processing and things like that. So, I mean, OLED's going to always grab people's eyeballs, and it will be a premium until the numbers pick up, until it becomes, like an LCD in terms of its just being everywhere.
And the question is, will that ever happen? The question is,
so, or something. something else will come along and challenge it and push it all into the great realm of affordability for all. Eventually nobody's going to want an LCD if you can produce a display type device or a display device that can do a perfect black. And I haven't seen anything to indicate that LCD is ever going to hit that, at least on off-axis viewing. Straight on,
I don't think so either.
You can get a very dark LCD with local dimming in terms of its black level performance, but OLED is just natively per pixel, and that eliminates your things like your haloing and other artifacts related to backlight systems.
Yeah, exactly right. And here's another thing. Here's another thing I learned working on Dave's B6 is that cranking up the brightness control. I mean, this is one of the very basic first steps that you do that we did. We cranked it up from 50 to 52, I think, to get a little better, less crush in the blacks. It still did a little bit, but beyond 52, the black level, once you're watching real content, rises significantly, and it's only by another couple clicks. So it's not a gradual thing. It's a pretty dramatic thing. So I say you really don't want to raise that brightness.
I 100% agree, and I may have mentioned that in the video too. It's just one of those settings generally I don't touch because unless it's I will look first at the gamma setup, make sure the right gamma presets on there. And nowadays for the LG TVs in a regular lighting room condition or a dark room condition, it's going to be this new 1886 format. And it works pretty well. I mean, they put a lot of thought into why it's that and why it should be calibrated to that. And I can't think of a better standard to do it to. I mean, granted, all your consumer video and pretty much everything you've ever seen has been authored at 2.2 gamma, but the 1886 should reproduce that. It should be more accurate across a wider variety of displays in terms of their setup. So
well, true, but if things are mastered in 2.2 in large part, I think more and more they're mastered in BT 1886, which is 2.4.
I would hope so. I still see a lot of pro houses still using 2.2 for everything, but except for when they are working in HDR. I will say the last group I worked with, we redid all of their monitors to 1886 or a 2.4 gamma if it didn't have 1886. And we did multiple color profiles for Rec 709 in addition to P3. The beauty of those not LUT boxes, but lookup tables that you can load that correction file right into a monitor. I would love to see something like that eventually in consumer displays, but that's probably never going to happen. It'll probably be regulated to something like you mentioned, like a lookup table box that sits in between. Which I've had some experience with those, and those can do wonderful work in terms of perfecting a display. In terms of literally everything about it, in terms of its color reproduction and whatnot. But it does add a level of complexity. And anybody who is calibrating those boxes, remember to just set the damn TV to its widest color gamut first. I can't tell you how many times I've come in and somebody added a LUT box, did a decent calibration, but there was one part of that Rec 709 color palette that wasn't fully out to 100% to begin with. So then all the colors got truncated, even though they were mapped well within the confinement it had. I was just like, the one basic issue is that they didn't simply go to the widest gamut first and then had it constrain everything from there. And so a minor setup thing.
But it's always better to start with as wide a color gamut as you can and bring it down, because it's very, very difficult to take a smaller one and widen it out.
I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, exactly. It may not be. It may very well not be. Unless you're
synthetically, perhaps. But I hear you.
Right, and then you're synthetic. It's like frame interpolation. You know, you got synthetic frames inside of real ones. Sure, the motion is sharper, but you get the horrible soap opera effect. So, let's see. Mahler music.
I will say most people do not need a lookup table box for their TV.
No. And that's several $100 right there. A couple anyway.
Save it for the next better TV. And the one you're looking at now, that goes in the bedroom. There you go.
Right. There you go. So what is the best way and cheap tools the average Joe can get to calibrate their TV, Mahler Music asks. And before we get to software and hardware and stuff, you also need some training. You need to know what you're doing. And I would recommend either ISF, Imaging Science Foundation at imagingscience.com, or THX video training. Robert, you've done one or both of those, haven't you?
I've done them both. Both are challenging. You will learn a lot just working in a workshop style environment with trainers that go over all aspects of it. I mean, that's invaluable learning if this is what you're going to be doing.
Right.
There are also lots and lots of resources online. You can get your head wrapped around a lot of it just by finding good resources online and studying the material. And working with good software that can also provide hints. Also look within the communities. The AVS forum has a wonderful calibration section where, and then for any particular display, even you can dig down as deep as you want and get into the specifics about, what are the things that make this display unique in terms of its setup compared to something else, or whatever questions you may have. There's a lot out there, but hands-on training with one of the THX or ISF folks is an awesome experience. Personally,
easily the best. Yeah,
I found the THX training was just harder in terms of the testing.
They make you do 10 calibrations before they certify you. I think ISF makes you do 2.
That too, but it was I thought just the coursework itself was even more demanding. And I'm fortunate enough to be just down the road from where the THX folks do their magic nearby, and I've had the opportunity to get in there and see how they evaluate displays from the manufacturers as well, and they have an amazing procedure. It's talk about what we were doing was detailed. What they do is like a whole different level.
Orders of magnitude more. Yeah, it's exactly
multiple
right.
Spreadsheets.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I do want to mention one other thing to make the learning curve. If you want to learn to calibrate, Michael Chen has a series of videos on his website, which is TLVEXP, the Laser Vision Experience, TLVEXP.com or .ca, because he's in Canada. And it costs, I think, $100 or $200, something like that, to get access to these long series of tutorial videos. So that's another option that's a lot less expensive. These THX and ISF training courses are thousands of dollars. And then you have to buy the equipment. And Robert, as you said, there are some meters that aren't nearly as expensive as the ones we were using, in the several $100s range. You can get CalMan for personal use at not that much money. But you have mentioned some free software packages that I didn't know about.
Yeah, I want to say that DisplayCal is one that's been around for a while. I'm going to look that up real quick here. I want to say yes, formerly known as, that's DisplayCal now, and it's displaycal.net, open source display calibration software. And is it HCFR? I always get this acronym wrong. Or is it HRCF? It's one or the other. Or it's neither. Let me just say R. There we go. I think it is HCFR. Yeah, and that's a SourceForge project, and that's been around for quite a while. But there are some free options out there. X-Rite makes a meter for $200 on Amazon. That's pretty good too. That's OEM'd out to a variety of other third parties that use that as one of their programmable, upgradable calibration devices too. So.
And you can always go to spectracal.com. They sell a variety of meters there as well. SoCal
HCFR.
HCFR. Yeah, SoCal Ray Jr. agrees you can't add color where it does not exist. And he also made sure I know that, it's Michael Chen at TLVEXP.com, which I think Ray might have helped him with those videos as well.
I think a good starting point for anyone, though, if you're just getting your feet wet, would be to go pick up the AVS forums, that HD 709 calibration disc. Mm-hmm. They have a PDF document that goes with that. And look at the steps involved from the start, where they start, like doing brightness and contrast first and making sure sharpness is set right and blah, blah, blah. That order of operation is just as important as anything. And then that document they provide in PDF form really goes over what it is you're looking at on the screen in terms of what should I look for in this test pattern, and how do I better understand what it is I'm seeing and what's right and wrong. And that, I think, would be the most affordable way just to get some better understanding with, again, another community project that's frankly quite awesome in what it is.
And free. All you have to do is go to avsforum.com and look for AVS HD 709. That's the name of the program, and you can download this file, which includes the document that Robert was talking about and the test patterns and everything. You can burn it onto a DVD or Blu-ray, and it's even high definition. You could burn it onto a DVD recordable, and it'll still play high definition content. It's not that much of it. So that's a free way to get started as well. Hey, you know what?
And that disc could also be used too for standard or high definition setup.
Correct. Correct.
Everything's, those two formats are pretty similar in terms of what you're shooting for in terms of grayscale and color setup. So
yep.
You're good to go.
You're good to go. And as a matter of fact, we're good to go because we run out of time. But I want to thank you so much for being here to do a follow-up on the calibration we did yesterday. It was so great to see you in person and work with you on that. And I really look forward to you going back there in the next week or two, hopefully, and reshooting some stuff and seeing if we can figure out what the heck's going on there.
Totally. Got to get that man good value. And if there is something wrong with that TV, I just want to see him swap it out for one that's proper. So, or who knows? Maybe everything will be perfect when I go back there. So we'll see.
Well,
maybe the software gods have smiled upon me, and
we shall
we'll
see. And if it is right, then we have to figure out what happened between those two times. Anyway, so thank you once again. I look forward to seeing you after your return visit.
I appreciate it.
That's Robert Heron. His website, heronfidelity.com. Be sure to check that out. Tons of cool stuff there. Thank you, Robert.
Hey, thank you, Scott, and thanks to everyone in the TWiT crew who helped out that day as well. That was a good afternoon of work, and it wasn't easy for anyone. So.
No, but it was very, very rewarding and very interesting. So, we had a great time.
My net cam here working a little better next time too. I'm in a challenged environment today. I don't know what it is. Something about the new Windows 10 update just totally hosed my Skype thing, and my camera controls are gone. I am not normally this red, but
I was wondering if you'd been spending some time outdoors.
I am, but not that.
Not that much.
That's unnatural.
All right. Well, listen, everybody can find me, of course, at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott and at avsforum. You can also find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, my guest geek has not yet been finalized, so I'm going to leave that as a surprise. But I'm sure it'll be somebody very interesting with lots of cool stuff to talk about in the realm of audio-video technology, so I do hope you will join me for that. Until then, geek out.